ghosts real? Several recent encounters suggest there might be more things in heaven and earth than we can dream of.
So are werewolves just a Hollywood creation, or do half-man, half-wolf creatures really exist? Now, tonight, we kick off our Conspiracy Theory Month series, which was
The legend of the vampire actually goes back for centuries, and it exists in some form or another in almost every culture. In fact, some people believe the first vampire story was in the Bible.
Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along.
Try and clear up an ancient mystery with the help of a prominent veterinarian who says she can prove that Bigfoot exists and that he's related to all of us.
New reports, 5 pilots coming forward over the weekend saying they've had multiple mid-air encounters with high-flying, fast-moving objects.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to Season 4, Episode 12, the season finale of Celestial Oddities Radio, the PONG, PairOfNormal Guys podcast. I am your host, Frater Crow.
And I am your co-host, Daniel James.
We want to thank you first and foremost for your love throughout the past several seasons, throughout all of the episodes of this season, and here again tonight for the season finale of Season 4. We have a great episode planned for you. If you missed any of the past episodes of this season or our other seasons, please go back and click the like, share, follow, and subscribe button. We do air on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Our past seasons are on Apple Music, iTunes, Spotify, all of those other platforms. This year we switched it up with the video and got rid of some of them. But look around, find us, listen where you like. If you are listening live this evening and you want to interact with us, there is a chat feature where you can leave a comment through YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. It'll come right to us. We'll air it on the show. We'll answer it. We'll read it. And, have fun with our listeners. We always enjoy that. We have some listeners already commenting in now. Cindy, thank you for the hearts. We have from Laura. Well, yeah, Laura, this is the last show of the season, but we have a lot of other great things coming as well. So, we are here with the season finale, and tonight's episode is going to be about spiritual warfare, which is going to be a very powerful subject and detailed subject. So stick around. Daniel, we are at the end of another season, brother.
That's right. It came too soon, man. No, what's this going to end up being? 12 episodes? 11?
This is number 12 here, and I looked back, and we had gotten rid of some episodes in the past for one reason or another that we've taken down, but we're right around 60 as a show for Pong.
Yeah, no, that's impressive. I'm very grateful for this experience. We missed a couple episodes this season because life happens, but I trust everything, is the way that it is supposed to be. So here we are at the end of the season.
We are. And folks, we're going to take a little bit of a hiatus after this season, but we will be back. So don't be afraid of, where these guys go. And we're not going anywhere. So if you don't see us for a while, it's just because we're busy with other projects. We got other things going on. We're going to gear up, restock the fuel, come back for another fun-filled season 5 at some point in the near future. So, stay tuned to that. We got a lot of comments pouring in. Thank you guys for tuning in. We really means a lot to us. Natasha, Vicky, Laura, Amber, all you guys. Tonight we're going to be talking about spiritual warfare. There's a lot of different ways we can go with this. Now, I want to start this out by saying, asking yourself a question. Have you ever been going through your day, feeling absolutely fine, in a good mood? You walk into a different building or a different room. No one's specifically done anything to you. And all of a sudden, your mood just completely changes. You're sad or you're angry and enraged, and you don't even know why. You're like, what just happened? I was fine all day. Why am I so mad right now? Could just be chemical changes in the brain, could be different stimuli that set you off, or more than likely, it's you are now under the influence of some type of spiritual current. What we don't realize is when we think of spirits, and most people think of spirits, they think of ghosts and ghouls and goblins, but they don't realize that spiritual currents make up everything that we are, we see, and we interact with. Every one of us is an individual spirit and flesh. All of the ghosts that are out there are disincarnated spirits that were once flesh. Deities, thought forms, egregores are spiritual entities that exist out there. And as Daniel and I have talked about over and over again ad nauseum, is that everything is vibration and frequency, but you could another way of saying as everything is spirit.
That's
And
right.
spirit's all around us. So we're constantly being altered and changed and programmed and swayed with influence of different spiritual currents out there to a lesser or greater degree. So it's important that we think about the fact that decisions we make are influenced by spirit. Anger and emotions we have are influenced by spirit.
Constantly.
We don't realize that a lot of times we're doing something, and all of a sudden we have this inspiration. Maybe it's your own, but there's a good chance that it's your own mixed with something else inspiring you, giving you that divine inspiration. There's also the chance that sometimes when you act out of character, like I said, when you get enraged and I don't know why I snapped out, or I don't know why I made such a foolish decision, because you could have been under the influence of something that maybe didn't have the best of intentions for you. So getting that right out there as a basis is just to kind of let you guys start to contemplate on the fact that everything is spirit, and you were constantly a puppet in a sense, and your strings are being pulled different ways through meditation, through different practice. You can get a little bit more control back over your strings, but there's always a puppeteer, above you trying to pull on that in different ways. And then not only that, but we do have different sides to that spiritual battle. Some pulling you for their own reasons and others pulling you for theirs. So we have to take stock of that and understand, why this is, what those are. Now, real quick, we'll look through a couple of the comments and then we'll jump into it. I got some heavy stuff to drop on you guys tonight, and I know Daniel does as well. What I want to say is, when it comes to my views and portion where my segment of talking, these are my views and my views only, folks. Some of them could be upsetting. Some of them could be offensive. Some of them could be repulsive. And if that is the case, I'm sorry, but this is my viewpoint. This is my reality and how I've experienced it, or information that I've gathered. Doesn't mean I back every single piece of information I'm giving you. It just means this is what I've come across. So I want to get that out there because this is a little different tonight than you hear me talking about. And it's honestly some stuff I probably shouldn't talk about. So if I disappear, get sniped from the rooftop, you'll understand why. Yeah, if something happens to me, real shit, guys, I'm about to drop some stuff on you.
Garrett did not commit suicide.
I did not. I'm a very happy man. All right, so oh boy, here we go. We got, hey y'all, very impressive guy. Talking about the show, counting all we've done. Thank you. Shout out to Natasha, who is our creative director, and all the help she's done throughout the seasons and for all of our shows, and just being a great friend of both of us. Good evening. Hello. Trying to get through them, guys. Sorry. And I just fell in love, Daniel. All right. Hey, they're coming in too quick. I'll catch back up to them later. So let's jump into it. At the beginning of creation, you have to understand that there is a divine force. The Jews call it Ein Sof and Ein Sof Ar. This is different negative veils that created creation. We can't define God. God is the ineffable. When I say God, I don't mean any specific name, Yahweh or Satan or any of these type of deities. I'm talking something much greater than both. We're talking about the original primordial source of all, the one. And you can call it absolute zero, whatever you want to call it, the all that it is. And then, the all is in all and all is in the all. So we can't define God by giving it a name or giving it a concept from our human brain. The moment that we try to box God into a concept, we have diluted him, because there's nothing outside of God that can box God in.
Correct.
There's no name that can define God, because God is all names.
Correct.
God is all things. He's ever expansive. He's ever growing. Every moment of reality, God is expanding and continuing to change. It can never stay stagnant, because the moment it stops, we all fail to exist.
It has
so
no
it continues. Yeah, it has no borders. There's nothing outside of it that could ever border it in. Now, being timeless, being forever, being, without end, God wanted to decide what it would be like, or to experience what it would be like from something outside of itself, still being itself, because anything it creates is still him. Don't want to be sexist. And it had to go through a process of what's called zitzum, a vacuum, where it pushed itself forward and then pulled itself backwards at the same time, creating a capsulized world, reality, that its essence could dwell inside and grow into multiple forms outside of itself. And this is what scientists would call the Big Bang. As it pushed its force forward, it retracted at the same time, and that initial spark of the two opposite forces created an explosion and created a universe. He is embedded into everything within this universe, but separated himself heavily from it so that it can continue to rule itself and move along while the divine sparks are still here. During that creation, though, everything was spirit still. There was no physical matter. And as you fell down through the different planes of reality, things got lower vibrational, things got denser. But there was archons, there was demigods, there was lesser gods. One of them would be the name that most of you are familiar with, which is Yahweh. And Yahweh trapped sparks of human spirit, or it wasn't human at that point, but spirit, into clay vessels, humans, and started to roll over them. I am your God, there shall be no other God before me. And one could say that's great, he gave us physical life. But you have to understand that we were endless spirit before the flesh, and we will be endless spirit after the flesh. So is someone taking your endlessness and trapping it in a bottle a bad thing? A slave master trapping you? Well, that's one way you could look at it. Or is it something where he's giving you sensorial feelings where you get to touch, taste, enjoy, indulge? That's another way. So there's always the good with the bad. Now, once creation started, once this impulse to create, it's much deeper than I can express tonight, guys. I'll have a class coming up on it, but it's very deep. The moment that the thought came, once he created this, once Source created this Zitzum, this world, this idea of let's create beings under us, there's always dualistic perspective. The moment let's create came,
something
the opposite,
other than itself.
Let's dissolve. Let's build, let's destroy, let's make, let's unmake. That would be Havayoth or Shavayoth. That is Satan. That is the impulse to return all back to nil. Now let's look at that from another perspective. Is something that wants to destroy this world and reality and humanity evil? One could look at it that way. Or could one wanting to return all of us back to our divine source and free us from the shackles of flesh be actually a savior? That's another way of looking at it. So we have to look at it that there's these currents. One constantly wanting to trap in the flesh and build and rule over. One constantly wanting to deteriorate, free us, and liberate us. There's good and bad qualities to both. And we have to understand that there is a war being waged within. Now, this gets into the tree of life and the tree of death. This gets into legions of demons and choirs of angels. This gets into how spiritual hierarchies were created, why there's beings out there that interact with your life, and why some might manipulate you one way and another. I tell you folks, people always think demons are the ones that are manipulating you and destroying your life, but in a lot of cases, these type of spirits are actually come from the root word daimones or daimon, and they were actually lesser gods who helped people discover their divinity within. They were liberators. Through religion and dogma, they were turned to demons, infernal beings that were malicious. Let's flip it on its head. Angels are often looked at as being these divine messengers. You know, angel means messenger, and they're these amazing creatures that help humanity. Well, that's one way of looking at it, but once again, angels have come down and done most of the wrath that you see in the Old Testament or throughout the Bible. Who came down and announced the flood of the great deluge? Angels. Who slaughtered the children of Egypt during Exodus? The angels. Time and time again, angels, not demons, folks, are the ones that come down and destroy humanity. So that's a perspective I wanted to give off the bat. And I want you guys to mull on that for a moment. And we're going to get into something much deeper here in a second. But I want to catch up to these comments.
Apparently my cat's like a celebrity on the show right now.
Hey, what's
Her name
up,
is
everybody?
Inanna Mookers. Inanna Mookers Marie James.
There you go. I can't say that, but you know, you guys heard it. I honestly was dealing with this today. I was completely fine all day, but maybe a couple of hours ago, I was so angry for absolutely no reason. Now, it can just be a lot of different things, like I said, but we have to understand that the spirits are all around us. People always ask me, what's your secret, as I've said before, to contacting with the dead or other spirits? It's like, it's no secret. You just have to start paying attention. Once you start paying attention, they'll seep into your life. It's like you're a sponge. They'll just absorb you, or you'll absorb them. So now we know that there's two different forces. There's many different forces, but let's classify them as good and evil, light and dark, creation and destruction, or another way I like to look at it as chaos and cosmos. Prior to there being reality, there was merely chaos, the endless void of nothing, no thing. And then creation started, cosmos. Cosmos means order. So an order was made with archons and planets and all these different organisms that created life. Prior to that, it was just a blank canvas. But once again, your vision of a blank black canvas isn't it, because that's a thing. It can't be fathomed. That's what makes God so amazing. People always would ask me, you're a Satanist, but you talk about God a lot. There's nothing that ever said a Satanist can't believe in God. Right. I don't follow Yahweh. I don't follow the religious gods that a lot do. I follow the true God, source, nothing, non-existence, the ineffable, unimaginable source.
Correct.
In a way, that's the most Christian-y thing you could ever do, but it's not Christian at all. So, let's get into it. Once upon a time, there was many gods celebrated and worshipped and revered around the world by many different names, but we have to understand that all spiritual names that we give gods, archetypes, and egregores are merely just coatings, frostings, or deific masks that we place over primordial currents and sources to understand them. You can have 300 different names and spirits that are all just different finely tuned masks being placed over the same mannequin. Right. And that mannequin is the primordial current of that source, of that specific type of energy. In ancient times, they were worshipped under many different names. Religion came, specific religions, and eradicated the world of ancient gods. Turned ancient gods into demons, turned a lot of understandings of religion and nature worship and divine feminine worship to be blasphemy. Don't worship women, hate women. Don't worship nature, destroy nature. Now, you would think me saying destroy would go back to Havioth and go back to the devil. No. A lot of times the people teaching you to stay clear of the goddess, stay clear of Mother Earth, and your divinity are the people that preach to be the ones helping you find heaven. It's twisted. And the ones that are looked at as evil are the ones trying to find liberation.
Right.
Through suppression, through many, many years of domination, of genocide, through enslavement and torture, organized religions were able to eradicate the old gods, push them back into non-existence almost. I believe it was Manly Hall that said, and he's one of my favorite writers of all time. If you don't know who Manly Hall is, go look him up. Guy's an absolute genius on occult and esoteric belief. Manly Hall said, a god forgotten is a god dethroned. Gods are given power because they are real sources or currents, and through our worship, through our sacrifices, through our offerings, they are given power to continue to grow and to stay alive or relevant. If they are forgotten, then they slowly disappear into obscurity. For thousands, the last 2,000 years, for example, Christianity has suppressed much of what is out there. They have turned the gods into demons. They have raped, pillaged, tortured, and murdered millions. And this is not my opinion. This is fact, folks. They will demonize everybody else, but when you look at their own rap sheet, it's terrifying, it's sickening, and somehow they're able, through their influence, spirit, guys. They have an egregore, a spirit that is so powerful that he has a canvas over the world, and even people who hate him, he can still somewhat suppress your feelings or make you forget about things. That's how they can get away with molesting and raping thousands and thousands and thousands of children, and we all know it and hate it, but somehow it's still able to continue to happen because they're able to suppress people. It isn't just that they're paying people off, which happens on a physical level, but spiritually they're able to keep dumbing us down. Now, let's take a complete side stop, and there'll be a reason for it. Dan, we did a documentary a couple years ago, I believe, correct?
Yes, the Bermuda Triangle of Pennsylvania.
Tell me a little bit about that, and there's a reason.
Well, I am passionate about the concept of cryptozoology and the concept that there are entities and beings that exist all around us on Earth and inside Earth, and in also other frequency realms and other what I call density consciousness levels that are real, very real beings like you and I, that medical science, historical science, our leadership does not acknowledge as real existing creatures and species, much like us.
Now, where did we film that at, if you don't mind?
We filmed it in Western Pennsylvania, what's called the Bermuda Triangle of Pennsylvania, which was 3 cities, 3 points. It was like Derry, Pennsylvania, Kecksburg area, and then there was the I'm drawing a blank on this. I always forget the name of it.
Blairsville. It's
yeah,
out that way. It might not be Blairsville specifically, but that's one of the areas. Chestnut Ridge.
Chestnut Ridge. There it is.
Now, one last thing, and then I'll show you why I'm talking about this. Burrito triangle. Yes, it was a triangle of burritos. So, Kecksburg was the site of one of the biggest what?
UFO crashes, extraterrestrial crashes.
Now, could you just tell me, and then we'll jump into the reason why. Could you tell me a little bit about the look of this spacecraft or what's been said about it?
They call it the acorn UFO, that was shaped like an acorn, that had writings, logos, symbols, sigils, all graphed along the bottom ridge of this acorn UFO. These almost looked like logos, but they were some sort of symbology. And the acorn was not as big as you would think. It was about big enough, maybe the size of a very large SUV, big enough to house a very small being in it, but not much bigger than that. You know, a large American car.
That's perfect. So, guys, there's a reason I took that detour. We're going to jump back and it'll all make sense in a few minutes. So these gods were pushed aside. They were forgotten. They disappeared. Let's fast forward from thousands of years ago, from the gods of Babylon and, Mesopotamia, and in Assyria and these different countries. They had Baal and Baal-zebul, and they had Ishtar, Inanna, Venus, Astaroth, Astarte, Aphrodite as the goddesses. They had Molech, Adramelech, and many other deities that, existed back then, and they were pushed into obscurity and disappeared. Except the gods never disappear. They only go back to their slumber. In 1940s, a man rose to prominence, a very, what most would say, evil man by the name of Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler changed the world with his antics, with the things he was pushing for. He believed in a divine race, a superior Aryan race, and one of his targets was the Jews. Some people don't talk about this, but one of his other big targets was Christians. Well, that's interesting, right? He grew up Christian, but grew to hate Christians, believed that they were preaching a false doctrine. So people think he just killed the Jews because he wanted a superior race, but there's a big part behind it that he was trying to eradicate the world of Abrahamic faith. He was trying to destroy the Jews who believed that they were the chosen divine people. In the Bible, you see, it says that the lands were divided into 12 different tribes, 12 different sections. At the Tower of Babel, they tried to make a tower to reach God because they wanted to show God reverence for how much they cherished and loved him, and they worked together as a people. God didn't like them working together as a people. When I say God, I mean Yahweh. Yahweh is also a name for Saklas, Yaldabaoth, the Demiurgos, the Demiurge, the imprisoner, as I said. Now, as he's seen them coming together and building this great tower, it says it in the original books of the Bible, in the Tanakh. It says that he was worried if they are able to accomplish this, what else can these people do? So he smashes down the Tower of Babel. He separates them into 12 different groups and spreads them across the world and makes their tongues foreign to one another so that no one can understand each other or work together. That's why whenever you're rambling on, they call it you're babbling. It comes from the Tower of Babel, because you're babbling. He separated them not to understand each other's tongues. Now, catching back up to what I was kind of getting at, is that they said that the lands were each given their own governor, their own divine spirit to watch over them. In the Bible, it says the Jews were given Yahweh. So every culture was given its own superior divine being, but the Jews were given Yahweh. If you follow that statement and many others, it tells you directly that Yahweh is not God. Yahweh is simply a demigod. In the beginning, the Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was. Well, El is God. Elohim is the gods. In the beginning, the gods, panel, plural, many gods created the universe. Yahweh was just the Jewish God, but they went on to say that we are the divine beings, are the divine chosen people, and they pushed that agenda. Now, this isn't anti-Semitic, people. I'm not hating on anyone. I'm telling you how it is from reading and following these religions. So Hitler believed that it was only in his cause to eradicate the world of Jews and Christians. It wasn't just a race war. It was also a religious thing. What people don't realize is Adolf Hitler was an occultist. And Adolf Hitler was building many machines to try to do things that no one had ever done. Everybody thinks the Germans lost. They think that World War II resulted in America beating the Germans and the world defeating the Germans. That's not true, folks. Their mission was to change the trajectory of reality forever. Not just because of the horrors that they created through the concentration camps at Auschwitz and all of those places. It was to actually do something to change the trajectory of reality. They were creating machines that no one had seen at that time. Missile systems and vehicles and jets that no one had ever known could even be a possibility at the time. They were far ahead of the rest of the world. The German scientists were par none. No one could match them. So much so that after 1945, America was capturing and recruiting all of these physicists and German scientists over here to work for our government under a secret operation called Operation Paperclip. Look it up. They took their scientists. Now, getting back to why I'm talking about all this, is Himmler, one of the SS generals, a very fucking vicious man, was an extreme occultist who had a massive library and was constantly trying to find ways to tap in and communicate with deities and spirits and the dead and gods, and wanted to use that as a war front as well, to learn how to use the spirits as a weapon against the world. So their mission, folks, as we said, is to eradicate inferior races as per their beliefs, and to eradicate this organized religion and their beliefs that they're dogmatizing everybody with, and to open up portals into other realms, to bring back the old gods, the Germanic old gods, which go by different names than the ancient Babylonian gods. But once again, these are deific masks of ancient primordial sources. Now, bringing you full circle here, and Dan's probably like, I don't know how any of this has anything to do with fucking Kecksburg. In 1944, roughly, the Germans launched a machine called the Die Glocke. The Die Glocke was an anti-gravitational time differential machine. A machine that flew very much like a saucer, that could, as their mission was, to jump between different dimensions of reality, to be able to change time and go into the past and the future. and to fly as a UFO would fly. This was in 1944. People seen this experiment in 1944 being launched in a courtyard. When they fired it up, and the ground and everywhere around there started vibrating with a massive velocity, and then the machine just vanished, never to be seen again. Now, let me pull up some things for you just so I have everything in front of me that you guys are going to need. This is where it's going to blow your mind, guys. December 9th, 1965, a UFO crashes in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. As Dan said, it looks like a unicorn. Or what you could also say is it kind of looks like a big bell inside of a bell tower, an acorn bell-shaped vessel, as Dan already described it. He did it so perfectly, this wasn't planned, folks. There was writing across the bottom of that machine that was this type of scribbling or sigils, or what some could say Germanic runes. The die Glock is called the Nazi bell, shaped like a giant bell or acorn. It disappeared, never to be seen again until 21 years later, when it reappeared in our reality and crashed down in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Now, people have done illustrations of what the Die Glocke or the Die Glocke looked like, and it's haunting, the similarities between Kecksburg's UFO crash and the Die Glocke. So much so that one of the depictions shows this old picture or this old drawing of the Nazi Die Glocke, and there are runes written across the bottom that are almost identical to what was said to be seen by the townspeople of Kecksburg. What I believe the Nazis were doing were trying to summon, through the occult rituals and practice, the ancient currents to come back to life that had been sleeping for millennia. And what better ways to appease spirits, especially ones that have been pushed back and reserved? Blood's a very powerful electric fluid. It's given in a lot of rituals of all different cultures over the world. Blood is a big charger, right? What did the Germans do? They killed 6 million Jews. Think of the amount of blood and spirit and flesh sacrifice that they committed under the acts of atrocities of war, but also one could look at as being a grand occult ritual where they slaughtered people in the millions to offer that blood and those spiritual essences to ancient slumbering gods to reawaken them, to build a vessel that is supposed to jump through dimensions and send it into other dimensions, for it to reappear 20 years later in Pennsylvania. Why is that important? Well, start to look at some of the things that popped up in the years that it came back. 1969 is when it showed back up, right? The world starts changing heavily around 1969, 1970 and going forward. What do you start to see happen? And I want you guys to look up a book by Jonathan Cahn. I've had some other you guys out there read this. Not believing everything that the man says, but he's very accurate. And I'm on the opposite side of him, because even though it seems like atrocities, and I by no means am standing behind Hitler, I'm not saying that, folks. That's why I said some of this could be controversial. I am not against the old gods waking back up and taking back this world. I'm not against the destruction of the current structures of dogma that rule this world. I am not against the tearing down of the fabric of our reality to create a new one, like one that once existed. I know that it wouldn't be pretty. I know that times before this new regime came into power, the times were frightening, and people lived on settlements in the woods by themselves, and at any moment another tribe could come and destroy them. But there was freedom, because we have been enslaved by forces that make us feel bad for everything we do. When you go and do something that you have that feeling in the back of your head, oh my God, I hope I'm not in trouble, or I didn't do something that's going to condemn me. That's a Christian belief, folks, even if you're not Christian. That never existed at one point in time. They have spiritually encapsulated us in multiple different ways to hinder every single thing that we do. Societal norms, right? Religious expectancies, right? Hitler was trying to create a world that didn't exist anymore and destroy it and go back to anarchy of pagan beliefs. And once again, though I might stand for the paganism part, I don't stand for the atrocities that he did. He did something that is barbaric and unforgivable. But it is truly my belief that he did this to reawaken the gods. Now, 1969. Let's go back and look at some of the things that happened in that time period. Bear with me, I have a lot of shit here. Well, what happened? Hold on one second. There we go. My phone's being all quirky. I'll pop a picture up here in a second for you guys. It's a little crazy. Do. Fucking phone is not wanting to work. All right, 1965. Well, in the 1960s, you have Stonewall. Stonewall was a pivotal fireground for the gay rights movement. That a riot broke out at a gay bar. None of these bars existed, but it wasn't like the grand scale that was to come. Sexuality started to be pushed. Things like Woodstock happening prior to that. The drug movement happening prior to that. The world started to take a cultural shift. Freedom, peace, expression, individualization. Starting to step out more and not be so afraid. With that, people started to step out with their sexuality. You started to see a lot more gays and lesbians. You started to see transvestites. You started to see a lot of other things. Now, in this book that I mentioned from Jonathan Cahn called The Return of the Gods, he outlines that around this time period, 3 gods were woken from their slumber. He goes deep. He goes deep. Like, I mean, it's mind-bending. Moloch, Ishtar, and Baal were reawakened. Now, if you start to follow the dates, and he doesn't talk about the Die Glocke, and he doesn't talk about the Germans in this way. He simply says in the Bible, correlating things that lead to current day, where the gods went to sleep and they were reawakened in the late 60s, mid-60s. I was able to put 2 and 2 together that the crashing of the Kecksburg thing aligns perfectly, because all of these things that were pivotal changing moments for these gods took place in New York, a couple hours right above where the wreck was. Interesting. All of a sudden, these gods reawaken, because when you start to look at the wars and things that were to follow, and the confrontations around the world that picked up after that Kecksburg crash, that supports Baal. If you start to look at the sexuality and the freedom of sex and the freedom of speech in a lot of ways, that correlates with Ishtar. Still to present day, and like I said, this book will blow your mind. You have to go back and read it. You start to look at abortion. Well, in 1970, the following 1970, a few years after the wreck happened, Hawaii became the first state to legalize abortion by the ruling of New York. By 1973, it became legal across the country. Sacrifices of children. Moloch was said to have sacrifices of children. They have killed 600 million children since the advent of abortion in this country. That's 600 million blood sacrifices given to the gods. Now, once again, I'm not glorifying this, nor am I condemning it. It simply is what it is. But if you start to follow, and I don't want to go too deep on this because I could fill a whole episode with just this, go back and start to look at this. They had a machine that is identical with what crashed. The symbols are identical with what was seen on the machine. Hitler was known to be an occultist with Himmler. They were trying experiments. They were building machines to change the trajectory of the future and everyone's reality. Everyone took that as such a literal statement. They're just trying to do it now. No, Hitler never expected it to work right then and there. He launched a plan to change the reality decades later. And it was the awakening of these gods who were very much here, who very much changed everything that's going on here, from abortion to wars. In this book, he talks about what is the symbol of Wall Street. Does anybody know what the symbol of Wall Street is? I'm going to look through some of these comments while they answer, and then we'll wrap this up here in a minute. day someone's life was taken because it is so good. I can't even get through all these. Mikey B says he remembers hearing a story. Let me throw this up here real quick. Says off topic somewhat. Had a conversation last night, and the person remembered being told about the acorn craft being that of a time traveler. Was there any lore of that? Well, yeah, time travelers, because the Germans were making a time machine. They were making an anti-gravitational time differential machine to jump. What was said was to jump between dimensions. Now, what's interesting is the Germans meticulously wrote down all of their plans for everything they made, from bombs to missiles to aircrafts. This vessel was seen by people, but they found almost no records of it. They kept this top secret. And the people working on it, it starts to make sense when you go back and look at the names of the people who were said to work on the Die Glocke. Well, you have Dr. Hans Kammler, a scientist for the Germans. You have Dr. Werner Heisenberg, scientist for the Germans. You start to get into other people like Emil Mazu and Jakob Sporenberg, who were the police in charge of the concentration camps. So you're having these scientists working with people that are committing the atrocities of the concentration camp. Why? Because the deaths that they were committing, the mass genocide that they were committing, was to fuel this machine to open primordial gateways into dimensions. Now, like I said, that spawned a lot of things. Getting back to my statement, the symbol for Wall Street is a giant bull, a giant bronze bull. What is Baal? Baal is a bull god. It's interesting that they would make their symbolism of Wall Street a giant bronze bull. And then directly across the street, they would launch the inauguration of a beautiful old-looking archway of stone, a replica of Ishtar's doorway to the Ishtar temple. Well, wait a second. In New York City, now they're making replicas of a giant bull statue. Across the street, they launch a doorway, an archway to an ancient pagan goddess, both pagan gods. Now all of a sudden abortion becomes legal and they're killing babies left and right all over the place. Wars happening, sex changes are happening, identification issues are happening. If you read this book, it goes into all of these matters and how it correlates with specific times, specific events, and specific verses of what was projected to come in ancient times. It is mind-boggling. So what I'm getting at, folks, is there's always spiritual wars. Why do people nowadays find being confused with their sexuality? Could it just be that they are? Or it could be that something changed the trajectory of reality to start making people question things different, see things different, swayed one way or another. We are the playthings of the gods. We are the puppets. And what is interesting is we give them the faces and the names, and then they control us. We create the gods, and then they in return create and control us. But they all are just deific masks of ancient primordial currents. Look up this information. Don't just go off of what I'm saying. I wish I could present even more and even better. I had other stuff I didn't get into tonight. It's too much to try to read all the things I have on my phone that I saved or I typed up. I have pages worth of notes here, guys. But it's something very interesting to look at. Now, let's see if I can slap this up on the screen real quick. Now, you're not going to be able to see the writing on it, unfortunately, because the computer blurs it for some reason. If you just search this on your computer, Die Glocke, and you look at this, of course, it's going to blur it out for some reasons.
That looks like a motherfucking acorn, man.
It does look like an acorn. Now, you can't see it right now, Dan, but this picture, it comes up blurry. That picture right there shows an iron cross on one end, which is a German symbol. On the other, it has a swastika. And then down here in the bottom, which is very blurry, it shows ancient Germanic runes written across the bottom. They side by side with the Kecksburg.
Very reminiscent of the Kecksburg acorn UFO. Very much so. You know, it's funny. I never connected these two. Not until tonight.
So Kecksburg Look at the symbolism written across the bottom.
Right.
Squiggly old runes. Well, let's go back again. I wish it would let me blow it up, but when you click on this, it gets blurry. It doesn't let me zoom in any more than this. They're literally identical, Dan. I mean, like
Yeah.
the writings
I
are
see it.
fucking identical.
I do see it.
So they did launch an experiment with the machine, and then 21 years later, it crashed in our country from Germany in Pennsylvania, right below New York. New York would become the central hub for the movements of abortion, the central hub for the movements of Wall Street and finance in the world, where a lot of decisions are made for war, where a lot of decisions are made with sexuality and the changing of laws for that. Like I said, Stonewall was a pivotal moment. All of these things correlate back to New York. And that book will blow minds when you read it. Now, like I said, it's from a rabbi who's very into Christian beliefs as well. And he's pushing that we are at a time where the ancient gods are here and we have something to fear and we need to combat back. I'm the opposite perspective. I agree with everything he's saying, but I'm on the perspective of the ancient gods are back. And it is terrifying in ways. It's not always going to be pretty. With every type of movement or war, there are casualties, there's sorrows, there's atrocities on both ends. The pagan gods arising again will cause atrocities and horrible things. And that was how it was many, many, many moons ago. But look at the opposition that it's destroying and tearing down have been known to do atrocities and horrible, horrible things. So I'll end my portion with that and say, keep your eyes on everything around you. Know why you're being influenced by the things you're being influenced by. And continue, as Dan and I always say, to do your due diligence, to read, to research, to dig, connect the dots, because this is something most people have never heard of. They never heard of the Diglaka. They might not have ever heard of Kecksburg. They might not think about the ancient gods, but they're here. That's not just my opinion. Folks, the ancient gods are here in our modern world. He did what he set out to do, which was change the world, good or bad. He awoke ancient spirits by giving them 6 million blood sacrifices. That's terrifying, but it is the reality that we're living in. So leave your comments. I'll do my best to sift through them. Daniel's going to jump in and give you his perspective on a few things, and we'll go from there.
Thank you for that lecture, brother. I appreciate it very much, and I'm sure our audience is fascinated because I've always admired how well-researched you are and how well-spoken you are in terms of your data. And that was a little bit of a history lesson as well, too, which I didn't expect because we've mentioned this before in the show, but Frater and I don't really make much of an aligned sort of congruent plan on an action plan for the episode, but we come up with a concept together and then we bring our own perspectives so that we can give people two angles to look at things. So my portion will be a little bit shorter, and I'm not going to hit you with a history lesson, but rather I'd like to offer you a perspective on how I see the concept of spiritual warfare from my own data and the vantage point that I'm looking at it from another scope of reality. So when people speak of a World War III, my understanding of a World War III is not that of guns, not that of bombs, not that of politics, not from one country to another, but rather a planetary sort of dimensional war over consciousness, over the power of your mind, over your perception, over your belief structures, the war over your spirit, and the power that it yields us to individual creator beings. So I believe that each of us, as spoken about many times over the years, that we are all fractals of an all source energy, the all that is. In a sense, what Frater mentioned, God is a borderless, endless aspect of raw potential creative energy. That's what we are. So what do I mean by that? I mean that each of us are total versions of God. We're total versions of reality. Now, part of the game of living a 3D incarnation is you come to Earth or another planet similar to Earth, and you play the game of forgetting that you're God. You play the game of forgetting that you are all that is, that you are a total scope of all matter, all probable quantum energy and circumstances. It is all you. Your perception of reality is a total aspect of you being a nexus point, the center of the universe. All of us are our own centers of the universe. But as you come to Earth, and we forget these principles, these core fundamental principles, that you are an aspect of God, you are a total version of source energy, then what does that mean? That means if there are entities, if there are currents, if there are deities, if there are beings that exist in another plane, another realm of reality, another what I call density, okay? There is lower astral, there's upper astral, there's fifth density, sixth density, seventh density, eighth density. We are third density from this level of consciousness. There are other beings, other entities in these other energy realms, these frequency bands that have an awareness of us. They can see us, they can perceive us, they can interfere with us, they can sort of, in a sense, influence us, as we mentioned earlier in the episode. But if we don't have an awareness of that we are source energy, that we are all that is, that we are total versions of God, source energy, then our creator abilities as God can be hijacked. They can be influenced, they can be manipulated. Our creational energy can be swayed in the favor of those that have the tools and the resources and the wherewithal to drive your direction, drive your focus and your attention to what it is that serves them best and not us, right? So I believe that the concept of ascension is really just the expansion of our consciousness and us reclaiming our godship and remembering that we are all that is, and remembering that we are not just fractals of source, but rather total versions of the all that is God. And as we remember this, we then begin to take our power back. But until we take our power back, until we remember that we're God, we are in a spiritual warfare. We are currently in what you could call a World War III, but it's more so like a galactic war that spans over the course of millions and millions and millions of years, if you even believe in linear time, that affects multiple star systems, not just planet Earth, many planets, many races of civilizations just like us that are all in a big soup, a big entangled mess of spiritual warfare. And it's part and parcel the way that a spirit realm will directly affect a 3D realm looks similar like this. Let's say America goes to war with another country. And this war is with soldiers and with weapons and bombs and combat. That's just a physical manifestation of a spiritual war that's happening on other planes of consciousness that we're unaware of because it's outside the realm of our 3D senses. Doesn't mean that it isn't very real. Doesn't mean that there aren't other types of conflicts happening, just like war can happen on Earth between countries, but rather it's not America versus this country, but rather entire species, entire races, entire civilizations, entire star systems on multiple planes of reality and planes of existence that are all having a combat, a struggle, a power struggle over the collective consciousness of humans, of Earth, of Venus, of Mars, of the moon. I mention those planets because they're all under a lot of the type of, sort of in a sense, the conflict that Earth is. That's another topic, but it's an example of how a spiritual war that's happening on another density and another version of reality that we're not aware of manifests down, and it affects the 3D version of reality, humanity, human civilization, Venus, Mars, the moon, other planets that are similar to Earth. Well, what I also want to tell you when it comes to World War III, that it's a galactic war, that it's a spiritual war that spans eons of time, and that not only does a spiritual war manifest a 3D human type of combat war, but we are also God. We're also source. And we are a version of the astral realms, of these other alternate densities and dimensions, that is just as important as these spirit realms that are also in conflict with each other, because they're all other aspects of us. They're all more of the all that is. And in a sense, your awareness of what I'm saying right now is part and parcel of what creates all of those other realms that are having a spiritual conflict that then manifests a 3D human war on Earth. They feed each other. They send and receive data back and forth. So what I'm saying is, This is spiritual warfare on multiple planes of existence, but your 3D reality, the version that is Frater, the version that is Daniel, is as equally as powerful and as important as those other spiritual density realms that are having conflicts, so much so that we are directly affecting them. And we have as much influence and as much sway and as much power over those realms that we can't perceive with our 3D senses as they do to us from their perspective. And the reason why I'm telling you this, spiritual warfare, World War III, is the war on consciousness. Because even known from one limiting belief perspective, we are these tiny little humans, these little 3D humans that aren't even interstellar and don't even have open contact with extraterrestrials and are still fucking poisoning and destroying the earth and having conflicts with other countries. It's because that's all part of the game. That's all part of them directing our attention and instigating our fear and instigating our belief structures to manifest and create these separations and these differences between us as part of the illusion. But we are as equally as powerful as the controllers. We're as equally as powerful as the gods and the deities and the entities and the currents that think that they have a total stranglehold over planet Earth and other planets like it. We are as equally as powerful as them. And the only power that they have over us is the fact that most of us don't know they're there. Most of us forget we're God. Most of us don't know that we are as powerful as they are. And if we would just wake up and remember our magic, our divinity, our creator abilities as imaginary magicians, then we could take the total power back over not just planet Earth, not just the 3D, not just our own civilization, but then that expands out to those other density realms, to those other astral frequencies, those other layers of consciousness that oftentimes are depicted as being so much more grandiose and so bigger than us that how could little Daniel James ever save planet Earth? How could he save the human race? Or how could he take his power back? How can we, end war and defeat the gods? That's just because our perception has been directed in a way that makes us look small and feel small, because we forget that we're source. We forget that we are aspects of the all that is. And as soon as we reclaim that sovereignty and that power, then we are as powerful as them, if not more so, because we are equal. We are all equal. The positive and the negative, the gods and the devils, the good and the evil, the duality. It's all a balancing act. And look at it as a game of chess or checkers, but it really just is a matter of who controls the perception, who controls the belief structures of what we're capable of. Once you remember that you're God and that you're an aspect of the all that is, and you are source energy, you're not just a fractal having a 3D human experience, but believe it or not, this is the totality of all of creation, because your perception of reality is what creates all of it. From your nexus point, from the beginning of you, endlessly, infinitely in every direction, without any borders. This is all just an illusion, a dream that you're projecting. So remember that you're God, and remember that you are powerful, and maybe you're having a small human limited experience where we don't have access to all of our tools, all of our creational tools. But once again, that's just an idea. That's just a limiting belief as part of the spiritual warfare. World War III is a war on consciousness. It's a war over your mind. It's a war of how big or how small you believe yourself to be. So as we wrap up this season of Celestial Oddities, PairOfNormal Guys podcast with my friend Frater, I would like to leave you guys with a thought to ponder on and a little bit of a thread, a key to follow the trail back to yourself. Because that's all we're doing is we're just, we forgot, we pretend that we're lost, and we're just finding our way home, right? So all of these other alternate versions of reality, the spiritual warfare that's happening all around us in other densities and dimensions and alternate versions of reality, lower astral, upper astral, it's all contained within us. And you're not small, and you're not a victim, And you are as powerful as the gods, because if you choose this for yourself, they can be subservient to you. That's a choice. It's choice. It's free will. So as I leave you guys with this to ponder on, remember that you are an aspect of all that is. You are the total version of Source. You are God itself experiencing a very temporary dream, which is the physical reality. And any sort of World War III will just be a war of consciousness and a war with yourself. That's it.
No, I think you said that very well, brother, and I think a lot of people resonated heavily with that. I mean, we have to understand that time doesn't exist, and if we're here eternally forever, the source breaks itself up into billions of different things to experience itself as billions and trillions of different things.
Infinite.
And whenever there's light, there's dark. When there's cold, there's hot. When there's good, there's bad. So it experiences it from all angles, from every possible vantage point. So why is there pain in the world if there's a great God? Because there has to be pain. Because is there not bliss? If there is bliss and happiness, then there has to be pain and sorrow. If there's triumphs and victories, there has to be failures and defeats. You cannot have one end of the spectrum without the other, or else things would not be in balance. And as much as the world can seem imbalanced at times, it is all a beautiful ballet of balance. Everything is in balance. That's why the good often is followed by horrible times, and then the horrible times are followed by good. That's why you have the sway back and forth, the constant spiritual warfare that is taking place, because it's eternity acting itself out from different vantage points. And here's a really fucked up, twisted thing to say. Can we really understand life without war? And people say, well, sure we can. Can we? Could there have been just a Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve forever living there happily dancing around with the two of them? No, they had to fuck up and get kicked out of the garden, to be facing the world, to be forced in the flesh, to try to work their way back to heaven. Or, as Dan said, they were physical beings finding out that they were God. They were kicked out of the garden by God to only have to find the lesson out that they were God.
Correct.
And find their way back into the garden.
Correct.
But in between there was conflict. We did God wrong. We were tempted by the devil. There's God and the devil, or there's the demiurge and the savior. There's all these different vantage points. Once again, a symmetrical balance between the two opposing poles. It's 7 hermetic principles that there's always going to be the opposite ends of the poles.
Right.
There's no such thing as hot or cold. There's only different varying degrees of the same thing, but there's many varying degrees on multiple scales. And that is how we perceive the world and understand the world, is through those different opposing poles. Now, Mike Bowser had asked, how can an individual accept the fact that they are God, but not allow their individual ego to get in the way of their ascension? I would say that it's easy, because the more that you discover your godhood, the more that you understand how absolutely fucking useless ego is.
Right.
Because the more that you discover your everything, why would you take such importance in this one small thing? The more that I understand that I am you, I am me, I am him, I'm her, I'm the world, I'm the sea, I'm the stars, and I'm everything in between. And I'm not saying conceptually, I'm saying really understand this. And this is done through hard work, the great work. Then why would I hold up so much stock of who Frater Crow is?
Right.
It's meaningless anymore. Who gives a shit? I'm just a character in a play that people are going to see and forget about. But once you realize that you're everything, you don't care so much about you being forgotten, because you is not who you really are. It's just a character you played. Let it be forgotten. It's like the wind. Do you remember the wind that blew past your cheek yesterday that you felt blow by? No, you forgot about it, because it comes and goes, and so do you. We're just the wind, guys. And that's what we need to remember. We're just the passing wind. But when you remember that you are what makes the wind, changes the game.
And also, instead of looking at your ego dualistically, look at it integratively. Integrate the fact that ego can be a relevant, necessary tool as part of you having a 3D human avatar. So
That's it.
ego,
That's a big part of it.
right, integrate. You don't have to look at them as fighting each other, but rather integrate the fact that you have an ego. It doesn't need to get in the way of your ascension, because you're always ascending regardless. Whether you're aware of it or not, you're always gravitationally moving towards home. You're always going home little by little, even if they're baby steps. Integrate the fact that you have an ego and be thankful for the fact that this aspect of you in a physical 3D human avatar needs limiting sort of aspects like that in order to anchor here for the sake of the experiential growth. Integrate.
Well, and I think, I mean, there's this divide too, Dan, that really fucks people up. It's because, like, words can only do so much to project higher truths. And the problem is people get so tangled in the words sometimes that they can't see beyond the words. So, like,
Right.
when people
That's
say,
true.
we have to dissolve the ego. Well, yes, we do. But then people get confused with that and say, well, then I can have no ego at all. Well, no, you're always going to carry an ego while you're a
Right.
human being and
That's
you're in this
standard.
experience. But when you rise above it and separate yourself and cause that chasm between your true self and the ego, you realize you're above it and no longer hold stock in the ego.
Right.
But then you can wear the ego as a costume.
Right.
You use it as a tool
A
to
tool.
maneuver this world because you are a god of this world. So
Yeah.
that's a very satanic belief almost there, because we are gods of this world and we master ourselves. But that's not satanic at all. We are the gods of our world. And once we separate ourselves from being so trapped in our own egoic prisons, we can then use that ego as a tool to achieve the things we would like to in this world. All the meanwhile understanding that we are not that character that we created. And that is what's important. You are the character or playing the character, but you are not the character. And if you keep those two opposing concepts always in balance, as we talked about, then you can master your world and bring any truth you want. The biggest reason people have sorrow and turmoil in their life is because they're so invested in who they believe they are.
Right.
You're so invested in your character.
The attachment to
that
identity.
Your attachment to identity fucks up everything else in your life. You can't let it go. One of the biggest things, and I've talked about this before in other talks that I've done in videos and things, is why would someone who's on the left-hand path, such as myself, constantly push confession before spiritual evocation or invocation? People, like I said, will say confession, that's a very Christian thing. No, confession's a human thing. It's what separates you in becoming to what you can be. Because when you don't have to confess to God. No. Confess to yourself exactly who and what you are. We tuck all of these misdeeds that we've done in our back pocket and try to forget about them. I say don't forget about them. Pull them out as many blades and stab yourself with them. Puncture that ego. You get down on your knees in front of that ritual chamber and you say, I fucked over my friend and did him dirty. I'm a scumbag. I did this or that. I yelled at my kids yesterday when they didn't deserve it. I stole that the other. I'm not a thief. I'm just using these examples.
Right.
But I
Analogy.
stole that the other day from that store. What a fucking slime ball I am. Whatever it might be, face it. Integrate it, as Dan said. When you start to face that and say, like, this is me, good and bad, light and dark, integrate it all. Dark night of the soul, facing those monsters that you are. It does something to change you guys. And it makes your power stronger in ritual and in spiritual practice because you're not hiding anything. When you call an ancient spirit in front of you and you can't even admit to yourself who you are, you don't think that being sees right through you and says, wow, this person's a fucking fraud. But when you call them in front of you and you say, no, I know every bit of good and bad that I am. There's no hidden blemishes on me. I have faced them all. That spirit will listen to you. It will respect you, and you can respect that. And that's how you get to deeper levels of ritual and gnosis. It's by facing those things, but we all try to hide from our pain, hide from our misdeeds. That's the wrong way of going. We have to understand. Like Dan said earlier, we're playing chess. Does it matter what color you are at the end of the day? Light, dark, good, bad? Because at the end of the day, you step back from the chessboard and realize all the pieces are the exact same no matter what color they are.
Right.
And both hands playing both sides are you.
Right. Integrate, and that will help you with transmuting.
I just had a deja vu moment. I'm going to have to rewatch later. So much great information. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad you guys have taken so much from our shows. Listen, here's a true moment of truth, guys. We love you. Dan and I love you all.
That's
we
right.
want to thank you from the bottom of our heart for 5 years of episodes, of topics, of phone calls, of stress, of love, of every emotion you could feel during these shows. We have given you. It's not been scripted. It's not been written. It's not been pre-planned. We are off the seam of our cuffs. We bring on an episode, we jump in, and we don't know what each other is going to say.
Right.
We vibe together as brothers, and we bring you what we can of truth as we have experienced it in this life and in many before this. And we are so thankful that you guys have enjoyed it. You've shared it. You've sponsored it. You have shared it around and grown from it. And like I said, this isn't the end. We will be back. It might not be this year. It might not be next year. It might be 2026. Who knows? But we're not done. Follow Daniel and everything he's doing, from That's So Meta to his videography that he's doing to the everything he's doing. He's doing a ton of shit on his end. Follow it, like it, sponsor it, share it. And then, from time to time, you'll see me post random shit up as I do. Follow that and like that as well. But truly, guys, it really meant a lot to us about everything that you guys do to support the show and show us love. Daniel, any last words, my brother?
That was well said. I want to express my gratitude for these last several years doing this show. I have learned a lot. I've grown. I've watched my facial hair turn slightly gray. Okay. I love you, brother. I love everybody that's been listening and sharing their stories. We do have plans for a possible, maybe potential book, an interactive book in the future. It's an idea that I have that will sort of encapsulate not just this season, but the entire show and the data we've collected. Once again, Frater mentioned that this will be an indefinite hiatus, but we will be back. We don't know when, we don't know how, but follow our journeys. I know that Frater and I will both be speaking at our friend Natasha's shop, Little Shop of Lilith. If you live in the Western Pennsylvania area, you're more than welcome to attend and join us. I will be there supporting my brother Frater. I will be speaking in April, and we have many more projects to give you guys. Even if it's not in the platform of this show, we will still be there. And I would like to sincerely thank you for being here with us.
I agree with everything you said, brother. Thank you guys again so much. I have learned more in the last few months just listening to you guys than I have in years. That right there is the way to end this show. Thank you, Lexi, for supporting our show, and that is what we have done it for. No personal gain, no financial gain, simply for you guys to learn, to grow, to integrate, and to change. So thank you. We love you. Daniel, brother, I love you, man. It's been a great ride, and we'll be back again sometimes, folks. Keep an eye out. We'll just magically pop up like phantoms. You have a wonderful night, and we'll catch you next time on Celestial Oddities PONG. Take care.